This is the Cloak and Dagger weekly briefing with Albert Marco and myself, Tony Nash. It's been a couple weeks since we've had a show, so we wanted to do a little bit of look back on the Iran thing. There was a lot of open source intelligence stuff going on around there. We didn't really want to jump into the noise there.
Hmm.
We published a bunch of things, but there was a lot going on, so we didn't want to just put more noise in your timeline. Several things we'll talk about today. First is oil. Second is Mamdani, this New York mayoral candidate. Next is multipolarity, and finally is China. So Albert, good call on oil. You've been telling us for a while it wasn't going to go up. And post the Iran bombing, we didn't see the spike that a lot of people, a week and a half ago, well, 8 days ago, were saying we'd see. So um, what is moving oil markets now?
I mean, moving them up, not much. I mean, it's just, a lot of guys out there, have this like ridiculous bull case on oil based on, geopolitics, which none of them are actually even experts in, right? They just assume that Iran can do blockade the Straits of Hormuz, and China and Russia will come to their aid, and
Yeah,
oil will surge to $200, and then all that sort of stuff happens,
yeah,
and
but that's not possible now, right? Like Iran
no,
is
it
new,
was never possible. It
right?
was never possible, And
Right.
when I looked at all these projections, and the state of, like, oil production in the Gulf and in the United States and everywhere, and like overproduction everywhere, oversupplies everywhere. I'm like, there's no. On top of that, Trump and Bessent don't want to have inflation come back, and the biggest boogeyman
Yeah,
of that is obviously
energy.
oil, of course,
Yeah,
right? And we've talked about this many times, of the shenanigans that
yeah.
happens at the government level, but it's just like, it was never possible for oil to go into the 85, 95, 105 range. It wasn't possible,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that
So
needs a
where are we
lot of.
looking? Where are we looking for the
I
next
think,
month
honestly,
or
I think
two?
we're gonna be range bound between $60 and $75 for the remainder of this year. I mean, obviously, unless a meteor hits the Middle
Yeah.
East, and then we're talking different scenario. But I think range bound is where it's comfortable at. I think everybody at that, for the past 6 months, have put those prices in their projections, whether it be the refineries, producers, buyers, so on and so forth, and everyone's comfortable right now at that. So obviously things can change one way or another. I mean, if a recession hits, that's one problem to the downside.
Sure.
You could look to the low 50s or high 40s. I mean, obviously, if a geopolitical problem spirals out of control, then of
But what
course
would
you.
happen? What geopolitical problem could push that?
I, you know, I nothing that I could see, right? But you just never know if Iran starts lobbing over missiles to the Saudis, right? But like hit like a refinery or two, just for you know.
Yeah, but we even saw that a few years ago, right?
Yeah, we saw that a few
And
years ago, of course.
didn't
So
really
we
hit
know that
prices
they could.
much.
What's that?
It didn't really hit prices much when they were.
No, but we're also a little bit more, algorithms and traders are more speculative now and
Yep.
get aggressive on that sort of stuff, especially with options and
Yep.
whatnot. So you could get like a spike to, like, $80 to $85.
So would you say with oil, there's a risk to the downside more than there's a risk to the upside?
100%. a
Okay.
hundred percent. I think there's a bigger threat to getting it going back down to like 50 than it is to going to 90.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So OPEC plus, they've expanded their supply a little bit as of May, right?
Yeah,
So
and probably in anticipation of all this, these games with the Iranians. So
yeah,
obviously they want to appease Trump. Everyone knows that Trump doesn't want energy to skyrocket, so
yeah.
they'll do what they have to do.
Okay. What else on oil markets do we need to be watching?
Uh, you know, uh, just honestly, travel. I'm wondering, like, how much, like, the drop in travel is going to affect jet fuel prices and whatnot, and
Yep.
what that means for the overall market on crude and refined products.
Are you seeing a drop in travel?
Yeah, I am. Yeah,
Okay.
I think there is a drop in travel. I think I just saw an article today that published that there is a big concern about that. A lot of it has to do with the drop in the U.S. dollar's
Yep.
purchasing power, right?
Yep.
Everybody and their mother was traveling from America to Europe and whatnot because the dollar was strong and everybody was, had excess money to use. So,
Yep.
but that's dried up, it seems. So, I mean, I think Europe's got a big problem. Air travel, transatlantic air travel is going to have a big problem.
Yep.
So we'll see.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, let's talk about Mamdani, this New York Democrat candidate who is a socialist revolutionary who went to a $60,000 a year private primary school in New York.
Here's the thing. Like I always used to say, like if I ever wanted to run a president or a politician in office, I would just go pluck a B or C level actor out of Hollywood, put a script in front of him, and just say this on the camera, right? And that's exactly what this clown is doing, right? He's bringing up all sorts of social issues that are trendy because he knows everyone's liberal in New York, right? So he's using these catch lines and phrases and scripted well, and he's acting because I think that's what his mother did, or one of those. So he comes from an acting background somewhere. So he's playing the game. All he's doing is playing the game, and he's doing it better than the rest of the Democrats are because they're fractured at the moment, especially in New York.
Yeah. So I had a friend from Australia text me this morning saying, is America turning communist or whatever because of this guy? And well, New York's a little bit different. I mean, there are the urban centers in America are a little different than kind of the national trend. So what are his chances? I mean, Cuomo is not pulling out, right? He's going to run as a non-party candidate or something.
Well, here's the thing. Initially, a couple of weeks ago, I thought the guys maybe got like a 20% chance, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I went to boarding school in Michigan, and I have a lot of friends that are, white liberal women, from boarding
Mm-hmm.
school. Some of them Jewish, some of them not, and they all support the guy, which
Mm.
was quite stunning to me.
Yeah.
Because I thought, they're well educated and whatnot. Apparently, boarding school doesn't mean that you're well educated nowadays.
Right.
But I think I give him a 40% chance of winning. But if
Okay.
Cuomo stays in and Eric Adams is running too, and who knows who else is there to siphon
That
votes,
Republican guardian angel guy.
yeah, then I think that Mandani's chances go up to like 60%. And
Really?
honestly, if he does win, I think everybody that voted for him in New York should be barred from leaving the city
Oh
for 10
yeah.
years. For 10 years,
Yep.
you voted for it, you get to live it.
Yeah. It's like Dinkins, right? You voted Dinkins in, you gotta you gotta live in New York under Dinkins. So um yeah, interesting. Okay, so what do you think that does? Is that a trend? So is he the start of a trend? Because I look at the mayor in San Francisco, and I look at the mayor in LA, and I look at the mayor in Boston, I look at the mayor in Chicago. There seems to be some backlash against big city liberal mayors now. But then this guy comes in and he's arguably more composed, right? But so is he the start of some sort of trend, or is he on the tail of that trend?
He's on the tail of the trend, right? Because this
Right.
already happened in Minneapolis, which is the example I use to everybody is like, look what happened to Minneapolis. Look what's going to happen to New York,
Yep.
right? That's it. I don't necessarily believe this Mandani guy is going to implement 50% of the stuff he says, right? Because
Yeah.
it's just ludicrous, right? But the other 50%, I mean, he could really just completely destroy the city for a good 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
But going back to your point, I don't think this is a trend in America. I think this is the tail end of it, right? I mean,
Mm.
even Gavin Newsom is like rolling back a lot of his rhetoric after what California's endured, and especially now that he wants to like look at the national spotlight, he's
Yeah.
starting to roll back some of his rhetoric. San Francisco is a disaster. Seattle, Portland, disasters,
Oh yeah.
right? I mean,
LA.
LA, downtown Dallas, disaster,
Yep.
right? So Austin, same. It's the same story no matter where you go. These
Yep.
gentrified liberal cities, vote in a more extreme version of their party because
Yep.
of policies, and then the city just goes into ruin.
Yeah, and
Right?
it's kind of the inverse of what people need to do. I think on a national level, people will vote in that person they want, and at a local level, they think, what harm can they do? But that's the invert. Like locally, you need to be thinking the decisions that person makes can affect my life tomorrow. Whereas on the federal level, it's different. It's far off. But for some reason, people want to be involved in the federal stuff more than they want to be involved in the local stuff.
If New Yorkers want an argument why not to vote for Mandani, simply look at Minneapolis. What's happened to Minneapolis in the last 10 to 15 years? That
Yeah,
that is
exactly.
your future right now.
Yep, exactly. Interesting. When is that election? Is that November?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see that development. Okay. Multipolarity. So in the wake of the bombing of Iran nuclear facility,
Mhm.
I think you were at a piece a couple weeks ago about multipolarity being dead, which this is something you and I have talked about for years. But what seems to me the biggest change is the fact that U.S. power projection is back, right? We can send 12 planes to the other side of the world. We can take out precisely exactly what we want to and then come home. Is that the basis of it?
Yeah, it's a little bit more than that, right? It's gone away from having a necessary carrier in the area to implement all the and landing and the launch pad from like Turkey or wherever
Yep.
to attack countries like Iran and whatnot. And it's gone to now where we can go around the world in 37 hours,
Yep.
bomb the hell out of something and come back safe and sound. On the other, but on the flip side is the way that was done is having the Israelis go in there and just take over the skies, which
Oh yeah.
yeah, I mean it's not like we can't do it, but the Israelis did it for us, right? But
Yeah.
This is not this whole conflict completely destroys the notion that multipolarity exists in this world,
Yeah.
right? There is no other way to look at it. I mean, China and Russia, just
Europe.
Europe are just absent, right? They're just words, going to the UN Security Council or wherever,
Yep.
right? Or the Hague to make some kind of argument.
Right.
At this point, the bigger I don't want to say multipolarity, but the bigger argument or debate that we can have is the United States more of a unipolar superpower, or is it necessary for them to expand the Anglosphere to help out in these type of situations where we have F-35s in different regions of the world taking care of the dirty business while we come in there and clean house.
Yep.
So that's more of an interesting debate to me than talking about Dragon Bear competing against the United States.
Sure. But that's like the Quad, AUKUS, on some level,
Yeah.
NATO, that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So at the same time as this happened, we wrote about this on the site, Xi Jinping pulled out of the BRICS summit, and we've seen that these kind of multipolar groups have really become less important over the past couple of years. And a lot of that started hurting in 2022 when there was the protest in China over the hard COVID lockdowns. And we really haven't seen Xi Jinping recover since that, because they pulled back on the aggressive diplomacy they were doing and all sorts of things. Of course, Russia's been defanged with the Ukraine invasion, all that stuff. So I just don't see who that kind of multipolar power is right now.
There is none. It's a simple debate. There is no debate. I don't even take anyone seriously that brings up the word
economically,
multipolar.
Financially, the U.S.
Nothing, nowhere.
Dollar,
Nowhere.
U.S.-led crypto, geopolitically, U.S. military. I mean, this isn't like us being dumb Americans. This is
this is looking at the reality. Is that going to change in the future? Yes, it is going to change in the future.
Yeah.
Is that future 10 years from now? No. Is it 100? Probably not, right? You're talking about 200-300? Surely, right?
Yeah.
The
We
only
use
thing
30-year-old planes to go to the other side of the world, and nobody else could do that.
I know it's ridiculous, right? It's just astounding how mental aerobics people do to try to justify that multipolarity is still there, right? And a lot of it comes from finance guys that like need that for their portfolios and commodities and stuff like that, right? The only multipolarity in the world is the world of soccer right now. That's about it. Where the U.S. is absolutely nowhere near being superpower status.
Yeah. Okay, good. And then let's talk about China for somewhat China related before we move to China. The bombing of the nuclear facilities in Iran pulled the rug out from under any hint of China invading Taiwan. Is that, I mean, not that it was a serious plan on the table, but After that, Three Gorges is a massive target, right? I mean, it's
Of course. I mean, of course, in some scenario where the U.S. goes directly into conflict with China, surely. But I mean, the Chinese are not stupid; they're pragmatic people. I
right.
mean, they look at what just happened, and they can't replicate it with anything that they have. While
Yeah.
the U.S. is using 30-year-old, airplanes,
Yeah. I've
right?
heard that the leadership of Chinese military is now has backups. Like as of a week ago, they now have backups because they're worried about being taken out, like
Well,
the
they should.
Iranian leadership was.
Well, they should be. Every country in the world that wants to be adventurous in geopolitics using their military should have backups upon backups because you're legitimate targets at that point.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Okay, let's talk about China a little bit. There's been a lot of gossip, probably over the past 2 months, about Xi Jinping losing power and being marginalized and all this stuff. And these rumors come up. They've come up for the last 10 years, right?
Hmm.
And particularly the last 5 years. And they all go back to a few people who spread rumors, spread rumors, spread rumors, and eventually they're right about something, right?
Of
And I've
course,
really resisted this one because I've heard Xi Jinping is sick. I've heard, for years,
of
he's going to
course.
die. There's going to be a coup, all this stuff, right?
Hmm.
But I've really started to see some of the things line up to make me think that this might be serious. So I posted about this today. Haven't written anything on it. We did something last year about if Xi Jinping were to die. This was what, a year ago that we posted this
Yeah.
piece saying who would be in his place. I don't think that's really valid anymore. It's still up on the site. We can do a new one on that. But I'm starting to see this as valid. And what I've said for quite a long time is that Xi Jinping would be out of power in 2026-ish. So this is lining up with what I've thought. And, he's really, you can survive in that type of environment if you don't get overly aggressive. And the problem is he's gotten overly aggressive. And I know you have people you talk to in China,
Hmm.
Albert. Do you think this is remotely serious?
Nah, not yet. I mean, I would have to see some serious economic decline in China. And I know there is economic decline, and some
Yep,
would say it's serious, but it's not systematically serious. And the
yep,
United States, I know firsthand that they do not want nation building. They do not
yep,
want to undermine the Chinese economy. Sure, they want to kneecap it, but they don't want to undermine it to the point where the country collapses because
yep,
there's negative effects globally, especially the United States.
yep. I don't see anything changing there before Q4 of this year
No,
because
no,
there's
for sure.
there's too much.
Yeah.
We're in Q3 as of tomorrow, so there's too much near-term risk potentially.
Hmm.
And let's assume that China fell like in August, right?
Hmm.
That's just negative for things like oil prices, right? Because the chaos, consumption goes down. It's really problematic, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about like a major consumer of commodities, China not being there in purchasing power. I mean, imagine boomers not having purchasing power and leaving the market, not being a
Yep,
consumer in the market.
yep,
It would be like an event horizon for
yep,
the economy.
yep. And so this is, my assertion here is that this is the bureaucracy pushing back through legacy political leaders coming back to help the bureaucracy push back. So the revolution, the 60s, 70s work that Mao did to kind of denounce a bunch of people, how did that end and how did they kind of arrest and prosecute the Gang of Four? It was the bureaucracy pushing back. This is the same thing. The bureaucracy is pushing back. It's not another leader who's coming forward saying, I want power. It's a
Mhm.
bunch of people coming together saying this guy's gone way too far and we're just going to push back. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's those things that happen in stages. There's always
yep,
little networks within networks, and they have the guy that they want to put in there, but it's not critical yet. I mean, but
yep,
that said, if Xi Jinping is planning to do more stuff that undermine the bureaucracy or threaten some of the elite in the CCP, then things can change. But I don't. I agree with you. I don't think anything's going to change in the next 6 months. There,
yeah,
right? We have these stories all the time.
yeah. I would guess you would see maybe something around November, maybe late October, November, something like that,
Mhm.
just given the timing in the calendar. But again, we have to see more things line up. This is just something that I put out today where I'm saying I'm seeing some things start to line up. This could potentially happen, but it's going to be Q4 before anything happens. And if anything, the US wants an orderly transition because, as Albert said, the US wants China to be a healthy economy. We don't want China to fail. We don't want to have autarky with trade or anything like that. We do want to claw certain things back, and we don't want China to get too much power, but we don't want them to fail because there's too much at risk if China fails.
Yeah, there's devastating effects economically for the entire world.
For everyone. Yeah.
For everyone, yeah. So.
Exactly. Okay. Albert, anything else before we close it off?
Not yet. I mean, the only thing I hinted at was about boomers' consumption, leaving the market, and that's something I actually probably gonna have to write about this week, next day or two, because it's. I was just discussing things with some hedge fund guys, and that came up, and it's like, what will happen when boomers stop consuming things in the United States? And this is this was really a discussion because of Bessent's actions with Treasury auctions that were like, no issuance, which is unbelievable, right? Everything that guy said, it's completely been a lie, right? And I'm gonna have to take this guy to task because it's just not right. I mean, the Gen Xers are screwed, right? They're screwed.
Always have been.
Always
have been.
We're gonna have to fight back.
Yeah, exactly. So just to go into that, you wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago about the Treasury auction. Why is that so important? Just quickly, because I know we covered this a couple of weeks ago, but I want to make sure that people watching understand.
I mean, it's basically, to cut through all the noise is funding the government, right? Now they've switched to crypto crap to fund the government, which is insane to me, right? It's not going to end well. I mean, you're layering Ponzi scheme upon Ponzi scheme to keep a bubble up. At some point, something's going to trigger, bubbles getting popped, and it's not going to be pretty. That's where it's coming from my view.
Okay, interesting. I'd love to get into that at some point. Let's
yeah, we will.
I mean, I'd love to talk through kind of stable coins and what's happening with crypto and why they're using treasuries, or how treasuries crypto props up treasuries, all that stuff. It'd be really interesting to get into that. So okay, guys, as you're watching, please please subscribe, please put any questions below this video. Please post questions on the Cloak and Dagger Patreon, and we'll see you next week. Thanks very much. Thanks, Albert.
Thanks, Tony.